Welcome to Missing Artwork, a show that lets artists behind your favorite album art tell their story and experience in making the iconic image of the music you love. I'm your host, Michael Escanuelas, and today we're talking to Devon Whitehead, the illustrator behind the artwork for the score of the cult classic film Troll 2. As far as cult classics go, Troll 2 takes the cake. Get it? Because there's a cake in the movie? Okay, that was lame. But what better way to open up an episode focused on a horribly awesome cult classic film, Troll 2, than with a horribly awesome joke? Released in 1990, Troll 2 is the king of the B-horror comedy genre. The film focuses on the Waits family. After arriving in the mysterious town of Nilbog, yes, that's goblin spelt backwards, the family is faced with an array of malicious townsfolk and creepy troll creatures. To call this film scary misses the mark entirely. This film is renowned for its bad acting, strange directing, and of course, its music. Composed by Carlo Maria Cordillo, the score features electronic synth, bluegrass, and random guitar tracks. It's eclectic and adds to the film's curious nature. So when it came time for Lunaris Records to release the soundtrack, who better to call for the job of creating the artwork than illustrator and horror fan Devon Whitehead? For this piece, Whitehead created cover assets for the vinyl, cassette, and CD release of the score. With the vinyl edition, he illustrated a profile image of the main child protagonist and a goblin from the film. Each character was placed on the front and back insert sleeve respectively. For the cover, green slime fills the artwork with die-cut holes for the hands and face of each character from the insert sleeve. This creates a clever double-sided package showing off many elements from the film. For the cassette and CD version of the score, Whitehead drew a classic horror film VHS-style illustration, displaying many iconic elements from the film, including the family, the goblins, the strange cake, and the goblin queen with a chainsaw. In this episode, Whitehead goes over his illustration process and his love for the cult classic film.
I'm Devon Whitehead. I'm an illustrator / sometimes concept artist. I've been doing freelance work for about 5 years now, 4 or 5 years. And before that, I was doing studio work, working at illustration company. And before that, I was working at a video game company. And before that, I was going to college for art. So yeah.
Moving from concept artist to illustrator, Whitehead let his passion guide his career moves.
I've always drawn horror movies and superheroes and sci-fi stuff. That's just kind of what I'm into. I collect. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I'm a total nerd. Really into horror movies. I go to every horror convention I can, and my inspiration is VHS artwork and, heavy metal magazine and comic books and stuff like that. I say my main artists I'm really into are an artist named Brahm and Frazetta, of course, and stuff like that. So I started out doing concept art is really what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an entertainment design for video games and movies and stuff. So that's what I started doing for a good I want to say a year after college. I spent all of my college years painting and drawing, but with the end goal in mind to do concept art. And I did it for a little while and kind of realized I was more of an illustrator as I was doing more and more just ideation stuff, which is cool, and I still like to do it from time to time. I felt illustration was more my thing. I kind of pull from the concept art world too when I approach any kind of project. That's just kind of how I've been, I want to say trained, how my brain works is kind of from a concept art point of view, and then I melding it with an illustration mindset to, tackle different paintings. And then I went to a studio that was all illustration based. I was doing video game covers and toy boxes and labels and all kinds of different things, and I was way more into that and liked that a lot more. That kind of led me to what I'm doing now.
With the Troll 2 artwork, Whitehead kept in contact with his community of fellow horror fans to jumpstart his work on the project.
It had been a little while, and I hit up Chad, like, hey, what's the next soundtrack we're doing? And then he was like, well, I'm gonna do Troll 2, and I was like, oh, that's awesome, I love that movie. I've been fascinated with it since I was like a kid. He wanted to give me full range on kind of like what I thought I should do, so he's like, he knew he wanted to do variations, like he wanted to do variant covers and maybe something a little different for Troll 2 than just like one standard cover. He was thinking maybe like a slime cover, something like a translucent cover. We even talked about doing like a heat sensitive cover, but we found out real fast that it was super expensive. Out of that, we started talking about maybe like a die cut cover, and so I did some sketches. Like there's like slime covering the kid, and when you take out the insert inside, that's actually holding the record, you kind of reveal more of the illustration around him. So that's ultimately what it became, and then Chad, I think, had the idea to have it be reversible.
Troll 2 uses a unique die-cut layout. Both sides of the packaging use similar holes to display different art. For Whitehead, this new approach created some interesting challenges with his illustration work.
That was probably the biggest challenge, was making both illustrations fit the holes. I was like, oh yeah, that'd be awesome. I start painting it, and then I was like, wait a minute, the kid's fingers are way smaller than the goblin's claws, and it's I had to draw where they would cut. I had to just kind of like make it as good as I could to fit both illustrations. When you flipped it around, it would still look cool, and you could see what I wanted you to. So I did that. I did like the kid, the main kid, and is like the main illustration with the slime cover. And then when you flip that, it's like the goblin. It's all goblins. And then I did another variant cover where it's like more like kind of like a traditional horror movie poster.
Many of the ideas for the Troll 2 packaging came from Whitehead's sketch process for the piece.
I work primarily digital. I'll sketch by hand sometimes, but I'll work on Photoshop most of the time, just line drawing. I think I drew the kid's face, and I was thinking it'd just be cool to have his face with like green ooze, covering him, because there's so many scenes in that movie where like he's like having weird like tripped out dreams where he's like bleeding green and vines are coming out of him and stuff. So I'm like, that's such a cool image. I thought that'd be cool to incorporate. I think I did a sketch that was kind of like what ended up being the final product, but like I think Chad saw it and was like, oh, that looks cool, we should do like a die cut cover with that. So I was like, okay. And so then it was up to me to try to figure out how I could incorporate this image into like something that would work for die cut and would look cool. My vision was that the slime, once the insert's inside the outer cover with the holes in it, it would look like he's like coming through the slime. Like I basically traced the shape of his face and the shape of the fingers that I wanted to look like it was coming through the outer cover. I basically put the trace of the kid over on top of the goblin just to see what it would look like. It was close, but it was still kind of off. So it was a back and forth of me going like, oh, maybe if I, tweak this and stretch this line out a little bit, especially for the fingers. I kept redrawing the die cut holes over and over and over because it was either too much or too little, That actually took me the longest time, I think, even more than painting them. So
Nostalgia plays a heavy role in the fandom of Troll 2. Whitehead's process also used nostalgia as inspiration for the green goo on the die-cut sleeve.
I got the idea of the slime. I don't know if you used to watch like Nickelodeon, but I have this weird Nicktoons book. Like it's this big book, and it's all Nicktoons. It's like talks about all the different like 90s Nickelodeon cartoons, and it has a slime cover that like, kind of goes over it. And I wanted I wanted it to be like you could touch the slime, you know, like it had like goo inside it moving around, but I guess that was way too expensive, so.
For the traditional illustrated poster asset of the project, Whitehead rewatched the cult classic to gain new ideas on how he wanted to treat the characters.
I'm pretty familiar with the movie, but I hadn't watched it in a while, so I watched it again. And it's weird, but it's not a very... I mean, I guess it's not that weird, but it's not a very visually stunning movie. I knew I wanted the goblins on there, and I didn't want to put them on there as they were. I've seen posters and paintings where they put them like as they genuinely look like in the movie on the poster or shirt or whatever. And it, you know, it's funny and it's how they look. But I wanted to make it like, you know, like it's a little cooler. Like maybe you put it on a VHS cover, like, you know, look how cool this movie is. And then you rent it and you're like, oh, what? They don't look that cool. But they're almost there. You could say, like a couple of them, you're like, oh yeah, they look awesome. But some of the ones in the back, you're like, they don't look cool at all. But I wanted the goblins to look like, you know, actually frightening goblins. I knew I wanted the family in there because a lot of the movie is like strangely about keeping the family together and about the family surviving this, I guess. So I wanted to try to figure out a way to put the whole family like kind of together with the goblins around them. And I wanted to incorporate the cake in there because it was so weird and it just came out of nowhere. Like, I guess, you know, the whole movie has to do with food and vegetables and stuff, but the cake is just so why? I have no idea, but so I was like, I gotta have that cake in there. So I was like, well, maybe there'll be candles like on the cake. I actually drew them with like flames coming out of their head at first, like, or like tied up to actual candles, and it just became too much.
This rewatch also reminded Whitehead of some of the characters he forgot from the film.
Besides a goblin, because it's been done to death with imagery for that movie, the goblin's always so big at the top, you know, or like the biggest character, like the main character you see on the covers for Troll 2 are usually like the goblin's face or something. So I was trying to think of another character, you know, the townspeople are pretty creepy, so I thought about having the milk guy from like the market be like the main guy. So that's why he's so big at the top, because he was just gonna be all that was up at the top of the painting, him holding the milk or like pouring it on him or something. And I watched the movie again and I completely forgot about, or just kind of wasn't thinking about like the witch lady who's got like the cauldron, and she had a chainsaw at one point, and I was like, that is so just out of left field, you know. It's just like such a cool image because it's so wacky, and she's chopping down this kid who's like turning into a tree or something. So I was like, I gotta have that on there.
The tone of Whitehead's work played an important role in his selection of movie characters.
I was trying to figure out a way to put the corn in there too, because it took up so much of the movie, that popcorn part. I gotta put that in there, but it just didn't work because I wanted it to be, you know, it's obviously it's Troll 2, so it's gonna be funny, but I wanted it to be serious, you know, like a cool, scary horror movie.
Although Troll 2 does not have the most stimulating color palette within the film, Whitehead explored several options for colors in his work.
Green definitely had to be involved, so that was gonna be my thread. Is, you know, there's a slime cover, the kid's got slime green, you know, blood or, you know, ooze on him, and then the goblins are, I think they're kind of brown-ish in the movie, or like kind of like this weird flesh tone, but I wanted to give them more of like I don't want to say like dead looking, but like a little less pink, more like greenish blues in their faces and stuff. Just make them a little bit more creepy. Plus, it kind of fit with, like, especially for the poster image, there's like kind of a blue fog that I had going from like maybe like the sky of the forest, and that was kind of working for that one with the green and kind of like green, like kind of blacks and blues of that like kind of image. And then for the reversible cover with the kid and the goblin, I started getting these like kind of yellowy green colors as I was painting. It's weird, like I'll play around a lot since I work in Photoshop. Most of the time it's kind of cool because then I can go like, oh, well, what if this isn't so blue, and I tweak it and like make it look more green, or whatever. And I can kind of get some cool different ideas that I might not have had working traditionally, or would have been stuck with. The only thing that I had a problem with is when they send them to the printers, you can only do CMYK, which is like when you're working on Photoshop or just when you're printing an image, you can either do it RGB or CMYK. And most printers for like vinyl covers and poster prints and stuff are CMYK. Like DVD covers and stuff like that are all CMYK. So working in CMYK is kind of a bitch because you can only use so many colors and it limits your palette. That's why I work in RGB. You get all these different colors you can work with and subtleties and stuff. But as soon as you change it to CMYK to print, it'll flatten colors, and bright greens will turn to muddy green and they'll look all gross. So, oh man, if you could see the RGB file, like the original painting I have of the slime, it's so bright and like saturated, like super bright green. And then I was like, all right, I'll change it to CMYK and send it over to the printer. And I changed it, and it was like the worst looking green ever. It was like brown or something. I was so disappointed. So I had to sit there and paint in CMYK and play with the levels of saturation for like a couple hours just to get it looking cool again.
Like many illustrators in his field, Whitehead takes advantage of the tools in Photoshop to create his illustrations.
I usually sketch by hand. I'll draw it out because then I can be faster and kind of loose, and then scan it in, and then bring it into Photoshop and start painting that way. Or if I kind of have an idea of what I'm already doing, then it might be faster just for me to open Photoshop and start sketching that way. I've got different brushes and stuff on Photoshop that look, like pencils or like ink pens or something, and I guess kind of start sketching that way. A big misconception in Photoshop painting is that there's some magic button that's like, okay, F5 makes it an awesome painting. And if you don't know how to paint already, your painting on Photoshop's gonna suck. It's the same rules apply, It's just there's just a Control Z is I think the only difference, I can undo if I screw up. It's the same thing. Like if you don't know how to paint, control your values, or you don't know how to place light or use different light sources, your painting's gonna suck anyways, whether it's traditional or digital. So I go about my painting as I would traditionally. Just there's more freedom to play around with, which is sometimes a bad thing. You get too many options. I start painting and I'm like, well, it could be this or it could be that, or it could, and then I just have to finally settle on something so I can move on.
Upon explaining his process, Whitehead revealed some important elements to his work.
I'm always just drawing for myself. If anybody wants to get into doing illustrations and stuff, I think they should just be drawing from life. I draw from life all the time. I go to figure drawing like every week and draw models, and it helps with, I think, the drawing on the fly, I guess you could say, or like coming up with quicker ideas, or being able to finesse things without copying. You don't have to have a picture right there. You're not hopeless without your reference. You don't rely on it so much. It's always good to have, but it's good to have a balance between, your own idea generating, pre-existing knowledge in your head of how to draw things, people and animals and environments and stuff. I find that super helpful.
Whitehead's work comes from a love for the horror genre and his art form. His style and the detail of his work fit perfectly with the crazy tone of Troll 2. With this passion, Whitehead has created a special package to a truly unique film and score.
I feel like I grew up in a video store, so I'm like constantly referencing, just staring at VHS covers, because I'm like, you'd pick up a movie and you'd be like, this cover's amazing. You go home, watch a movie, it's so shitty. But I wouldn't be that disappointed because I get to stare at this image, I was like, that was horrible, but this is still so cool,
Missing Artwork is a collaboration of Chris Lantinen and myself, Michael Escanuelas. We are part of the Modern Vinyl family of podcasts, which represents other great shows like Pilot Study and Vinyl Crawl. Check out modern-vinyl.com to see the latest vinyl news, features, and to find out more information about our podcast family. Thank you to Mark Reddito for our theme music. And of course, thank you to Devon Whitehead for talking with us. You can see more of his work on Instagram under the username @DevonDraws. We are still in our podcast infancy, so please go and subscribe to our show on iTunes or whatever podcast service you favor, and leave a review telling us how much you love us and the show. Then go share us with your friends. We're always on the hunt for new listeners. You can also follow us on Twitter @MissingArtwork or @ModernVinyl. Thank you for listening.
It's not my fault.